There is a new template midfield which could be emerging over the next few game weeks, and in this video I'm going to reveal exactly what that could look like, as well as answering all of those game week 9 hot topics that you want answering. So as always guys, make sure you do drop a like on this video. We're aiming for 200 on today's video, and of course please do consider smashing that subscribe button. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. Okay, first up, we need to talk about a potential 4.4 million defender playing for Liverpool. Yes, you heard that correctly, because as of the time of recording right now, we have no concrete evidence on this, but it looks like Robertson could be ruled out for up to 10 weeks with that shoulder injury that he sustained on international duty. Now again, please do take that with a pinch of salt. We hopefully will get some confirmation from Jurgen Klopp in the next 24 hours. However, if this is true, and Robertson is ruled out for the next 10 weeks, we have to make the assumption that Tsimikas is at least a consideration for Klopp to be played at left back. Now, I'm going to be looking at right now the pros and cons of owning Tsimikas in your FPL teams, because we need to remember 4.4 million for any defender is an absolute FPL gem. And if he does start for them, then this guy is absolutely essential. So, as I mentioned, 4.4 million, 0.3% owned. Again, such a differential in the game. So what's the good thing about him? First up, a cheap route into those great Liverpool fixtures. We need to remind ourselves, Everton at home, Forest at home, Luton away, a blunt Brentford attack at home. It looks fantastic over the next 4. And if we were to get confirmation from Jurgen Klopp that Tsimikas is going to step into the part of Robertson in this team, then everybody needs to jump on Tsimikas, because even if you don't want to start him, he's an unbelievable squad depth player to have in your team. Next up, potential attacking asset. Now, the reason why I put potential in quotations is because we're going to touch on the Robertson heat map in a minute and how he was being deployed in this Liverpool team. Because remember, Liverpool have slightly evolved over the last few years. Previous seasons, we saw Trent and Robertson bombing forward to them touchlines and hooking back those balls for the forwards to score. We've seen slightly different variations of both Robertson and Trent over the last 12 months. So I don't want to jump to conclusions and say if Tsimikas does play, he's going to be this all-out attacking fullback that's going to get assists and goals. I don't think that, because the Liverpool system has evolved. But it is worth noting that Tsimikas is a very attacking fullback in nature. So Klopp may have to adapt his style if he does bring Tsimikas into the team. And last up, an amazing wildcard enabler. If you're planning on wildcarding in game weeks 9 or 10, and you're looking to maybe find some filler in your team in terms of downgrading certain departments, because for example, Ollie Watkins is 8.2 million right now, and you may need to find some funds elsewhere, Tsimikas is an amazing option for those teams, and I will be covering them off in a wildcard team later on in this video. But the big problem with Tsimikas, the only con that I've really put here, is there's no guarantee on that game time. And the reason why I say that is because we could see a scenario where, for example, Klopp plays Joe Gomez at left back, plays Van Dijk centre back, Konate, and then Trent. And in attacking phases, simply puts Trent into the double pivot midfield and then plays a back 3. Now, it's worth noting, we haven't actually seen that right now from Jurgen Klopp. So it seems like the way that he's playing his team, Tsimikas would be more of a natural replacement for Robertson. But again, I don't want you guys to jump the gun and just think because Robertson might be out that Tsimikas is going to naturally replace him. But look, let's take a look at some Robertson heat maps right now to see what we could get from Tsimikas if he was to be the heir to that left back throne. So here we have 2 touch heat maps for Robertson in 2 separate games. We got game week 6 versus West Ham, and we've got game week 8 versus Brighton. Obviously, there are other games that we could have taken into account, but game week 7, Liverpool were down to 10 men and then eventually 9 men. And there were other games that were slight anomalies. So I've just taken 2 recent games to give you a bit of an idea on where Robertson was being deployed in this Liverpool team. And it's worth noting, if you're sat there thinking, give us some Tsimikas underlying stats, well, he's only played 4 minutes of Premier League football this season, so we literally can draw no conclusions from him based on this season. And last season, yes, we could look at Tsimikas data, but this Liverpool team is completely different. We've got people like McAllister, Szoboszlai to being deployed in this midfield area. We do not know how Tsimikas is going to be adapted into this team. So I want to more look at how Liverpool have played as a team rather than what Tsimikas was doing last season. I think that's a better idea going forward. So, first up, versus West Ham, obviously they won this game 3-1. You can see basically Liverpool attacking down here. He's getting decent areas, Robertson. Now, it's not necessarily the Robertson that we saw years gone by, where basically the heat map would just be completely in the final third, but he isn't necessarily playing as a back three that some of us were worried about in pre-season. We're not seeing Robertson just completely play alongside Van Dijk and Konate. He does have the license to get forward. We can see that in those final third areas. So good news if Tsimikas was to come into this Liverpool team and basically be told to play the same as what Robertson's doing. And the other heat map that you can see here, Game Week 8 versus Brighton, again, less touches. We would expect that with Liverpool getting not necessarily dominated by Brighton, but in a tougher fixture where they don't have possession. He was getting into still some attacking areas, but obviously to try and combat the attacking wingers that Brighton had, he wasn't getting us forward as much in that fixture. But it's worth noting, when I looked at the average positions for Robertson and the right back of Liverpool, whether that be Trent or Gomez, we're not seeing the right back invert into midfield as much as we saw at the back end of last season. So I think Klopp is playing much more of a natural back four and asking his fullbacks to go forward when they can. So I think if Tsimikas does come in Game Week 9 for Liverpool, I think we'll see a natural fullback. I don't think he's going to be played as a centre-back going into transitional areas. I think he will go forward and offer attacking potential. And this is fantastic for a 4.4 million option. So my general conclusion of Tsimikas is this. If you're planning a wildcard in a Game Week 10, you're in an amazing position because I would let Game Week 9 happen, see if Tsimikas does come into the team. And if he does, Game Week 10, such an obvious time for you to put him in your wildcard. If you're looking to bring him in Game Week 9, I do think there is slight caution about it because we could just easily see Gomez come in and we see nothing from Tsimikas. So I would say if you can, wait until Game Week 10, or at least where we get some information from Jurgen Klopp about Robertson's injury, or at least who is going to replace him if he is ruled out longer term. But with the fixtures coming up, I expect Liverpool to be very attacking in these home fixtures. Okay, next up, I want to talk about some fixture swings in the FPL landscape right now because I think there are a lot of teams that are either coming to the end of a good run or are about to begin a fantastic run. And if you're in a position right now where you've used your wildcard and you're starting to plan long-term transfers, this is for you. And equally, if you're looking to wildcard in Game Week 9 or Game Week 10, then again, this is a perfect opportunity for you to get an understanding on which teams to target. Now, I've basically filtered this by best fixtures at the top, which are Aston Villa, all the way down to some of the worst. Now, I've taken some teams out of this because I just don't think we are going to consider anybody from the likes of Luton, Sheffield United as examples. So this has been slightly adapted, but I think for the benefit of the video. So first and foremost, I want to cover off a few teams that I think are just long-term. If you were to buy them today, you can hold long-term. Aston Villa being one of those. The entry point for Game Week 9 isn't the best at home against West Ham, but I still think it is perfectly fine. And look at those fixtures. West Ham, Luton, Forest, Fulham, Spurs, Bournemouth. If you're in the market for a Matty Cash or a Watkins, I don't think you need to hesitate. I think Game Week 9 is a perfect opportunity for you to bring them into your teams. And especially if you're looking to wildcard in Game Week 10, very, very difficult to ignore both Watkins and Matty Cash because not only are you going to be ignoring Game Week 10 versus Luton at home, you're then going to be ignoring Forest, Fulham, Spurs, Bournemouth. I just don't see a world where if you wildcard in Game Week 10 and you have the money available, you don't go for the double up of Matty Cash and Ollie Watkins. Now, the only way you might consider going alternative to that is because Liverpool are another example of a team that you can invest in right now and hold long term. Everton at home, yes, it can be a tough game in a derby, but I still expect Liverpool to score 2 goals against any team based on the XG they've been posting so far this season. Then Forest, Luton, Brentford, yes, they got Man City, but then after that, Fulham at home, same applies. If you're in the market right now for a Liverpool player, now's the time to buy. But equally, if you want to let Game Week 9 pass against Everton, in Game Week 10 at home against Nottingham Forest, a great time to use your wildcard. Triple up, double up on those Liverpool assets, knowing that you could hold them long term. And the same applies. How can you ignore Mo Salah over this period? I get it. Yes, there are going to be cheaper options in the midfield that you could consider, but Mo Salah's game time over this period is just going to be absolutely locked in. He's on penalties and, importantly, a bonus point magnet right now. So for me, Liverpool's Salah is a non-negotiable over this period. The one thing I would say is, maybe if you're wildcarding in game week 10, you look at these fixtures and think to yourself, I can't afford Ollie Watkins, but what an amazing opportunity to jump on Darwin Núñez. And I wouldn't be against that. I just don't like Darwin Núñez for game week 10. Now, I'm going to fly past Nottingham Forest because I don't really think they're good considerations. But one that I think we do need to consider is going to be Crystal Palace, especially if you're wildcarding in game week 10. Don't think the entry point is now in game week 9, but if you were wildcarding in game week 10, maybe consider someone like a Mark Guy or even someone like an Anderson in your teams, because while I wouldn't necessarily start them in game week 10, 11, 12 against Everton, 13 against Luton, really good opportunities for maybe you to save a bit of money, go for somebody like a Guy at 4.5 and deploy him in game weeks 11, 12 and 13 if you do need that defensive coverage. And the reason why I've mentioned Crystal Palace is because I want to bring you down to the bottom ticker here, Newcastle. A lot of people have investment in Newcastle, and I really advise you not jumping off Newcastle in game week 9 at home against an injury-stricken Crystal Palace. That is not the time to move away. However, game week 10 onwards, Wolves away, I probably still would expect a clean sheet, but then Arsenal, Bournemouth's tough, but then Chelsea and Man United, I know it's at St James's Park, but they do have Champions League over this period, and it could be an opportunity if you can't afford Kieran Trippier, and you're looking at Dan Burn and Botman and thinking, I don't really like him, maybe consider a Crystal Palace defender as an alternative to that Newcastle defender, but again, it would take a brave manager to swing against that Newcastle defence. Last few teams here I want to cover off. Arsenal, not necessarily the time to invest right now, and it's why I'm not advocating a game week 9 wildcard, because game week 10 just seems like the most obvious swing ever. Sheffield United at home, yes, they got Newcastle away, but I still fancy Arsenal to score. Then Burnley, Brentford, Wolves. This is the time to jump on Arsenal. Saka's dropped in price to 8.5. What an opportunity to go for Arsenal assets from game week 10 and beyond. So the reason why I brought this fixture up here, guys, is because we need to get an understanding of which teams are becoming good and which teams are going to become bad. One of those is Man United. I wouldn't be selling Man United this week, but then after this week, you could consider it if you wanted to. But I love to bring this up here because you might look at Man City and think, oh, got to sell them. But then Fulham, Luton, Everton, really, really good fixtures of Man United. But I can't sit here and tell you to keep Man United assets right now. Last up, we need to talk about Spurs. Bottom of the ticker. This is where the argument needs to be about, do we move away from Spurs defenders and do we move away from both Son and Maddison? Fulham at home is not the time to move away from those assets. Crystal Palace defensively are very, very strong, so I wouldn't necessarily say that is going to be a goal fest. Then Chelsea, Wolves, Villa, Man City. Don't look at those fixtures and think they are the best to own triple Spurs. So maybe from game week 10, maybe game week 11 onwards, is start the time to move away from those attacking and defensive options and start to allocate those funds into the Aston Villas, the Liverpools and the Arsenals, because that is where the template is going to be long term. So on the subject of Spurs, perfect opportunity to talk about who should we sell between both Son or Maddison. Now, I know you might be sat there thinking, I'm not going to sell either of those, but after the fixtures that you did see, maybe you need to consider allocating one of those midfield spots to the other teams that I did mention, like a Saka, an Odegaard, or a Martinelli. So first up, I want to bring up the touch heat maps for both Son, this one here, and the far one that you can see of Maddison. Now, it's worth noting, this is over the period where Son has played as a forward. I don't care about when he played as a left winger, because the expectation is that he is going to be deployed as a forward from the foreseeable future. Obviously, Maddison's position hasn't changed over this period, but I think this is around game week 4 onwards where we saw Son be deployed in that position against Burnley. So obviously, we know that Son's penalty box touches are way better than that of Maddison's. Maddison's all over the place in a good way. He's the creative force in this team. He's taking corners from both sides, indirect, direct free kicks. He is basically the creative heartbeat of this Spurs team. If he was to get injured, it is real bad news for Spurs. Son, on the other hand, not getting involved as much in the build-up play, but exactly what you want to see if you're going to be paying 9 million for an asset. I want him completely between the sticks, which we can see here on the touch heat map, and in and around that penalty spot. So he ticks all of those boxes. The main box that he doesn't tick is those minutes. coming off around the 70-minute mark every single game. During the international break, we have seen him in some discomfort. We've seen some quotes saying that he is struggling with a slight knock. So coming into the game on the weekend, I don't even necessarily think it is a guarantee that Son is going to play a 90 minutes fixture at home against Fulham. If they were to be in a comfortable spot and hopefully he would have scored over that period, then maybe he does come off again. And realistically, look at the touch heat map. I think it is obvious that Son is the better FPL option if he was to play significant minutes, but the minutes is the big issue right now. Now, moving away from the touch heat map, I wanted to look at the underlying stats for both of these players just to back up the argument, because Son's numbers are fantastic. XG per 90, 0.8 compared to Maddison's 0.17. Shots are better, shots on target. Shots in the box is the big one here. 3.11 for Son, 0.86 for James Maddison. Really interesting there. I thought Maddison's shots in the box were slightly higher than that. So seeing that number does make me a little bit, oh, maybe Maddison is really not going to be amongst the goals this season. But obviously, in terms of creativity, Maddison leads the way. You can see that for expected assists per 90, attempted assists, and big chances created. So naturally, Son is the better FPL option, but with these minutes, I am a little bit worried about him. And looking at these fixtures here, as I mentioned, you do not move away from Maddison or Son in game week 9 at home against Fulham. I just think that is a disaster waiting to happen, unless we do get news that maybe Son is a risk. But after that, I think Crystal Palace are good defensively, and I quite rate Chelsea defensively as well. So maybe around this period, if you've already used your wildcard, for example, I would consider, and I'm going to put it out there, selling Son for a Saka, Martinelli or Odegaard to jump on those Arsenal assets. Now, of course, if you have your wildcard available, you have a bit more flexibility. You can build your midfield exactly how you want to. But if I owned both Son and Maddison because I wildcarded in game week 8, I think I'd move away from Son. He's the cash cow. Yes, he is the better option, but he is coming off early. And I would look to allocate those funds to an Arsenal asset around game week 10. Let me know your thoughts, guys, but I think Son is probably the one I would sell out of the two, and maybe even make the argument to move away from Maddison later down the line if we don't see a goal-scoring threat from him in this Spurs team. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Well. Anyone that follows the channel knows that any chance I can have to put a Man United slide in my videos, I will do. And the reason being is because I have owned Rashford and Bruno Fernandes since game week 1, and I have had 0 rewards from them. But the reason why I have it here, keep Man United attackers, is because they play the worst team in the league by far. The numbers, I've got them here just to tell you how terrible they are based on, this is per 90 minutes, remember. So Sheffield United on average concede 22 shots per 90 minutes, 15 in the box, and their expected goals conceded per 90 minutes is 2.66. Now, sorry, I do get riled up from this because I am a man who has been very, very hurt from this Man United pair of Rashford and Bruno Fernandes. But if you are a stupid FPL manager like myself and you have held your Man United pair or even one of these over the long term, I don't think this is the time to sell them. Now, I know they have been so bad. I know you might want to jump on other assets. But as I discussed in terms of the fixture swings, Game Week 9 doesn't feel like the absolute be-all and end-all for fixture swings. Arsenal in Game Week 10 is where you want to buy those assets. It's not the time to jump on them. Yes, if you could do one of your Man United assets to Mo Salah, I cannot sit here and tell you not to. That is obviously a good move. Even a Diego Jota if you want to go a bit differential in that Liverpool team. But maybe this is where we do finally get rewarded for holding these two players. Looking at the numbers for both, they're not bad. XG per 90 for Rashford, 0.45, is better than a lot of midfielders. And even Fernandes is at 0.33. The shots per 90 are great. And again, we're playing against a team that have the worst shots per 90 of any squad. They've got injuries to Egan, long-term injury to Baldock as well. So, look, beyond Game Week 9, there is no world where I keep Man United assets because they have pained me too much. And hopefully they have for you as well, unless you're a maniac. So, what I'm saying is this. I think Game Week 9, we keep double Man United midfield for one last ride. And then in Game Week 10, you do one of two things. You either wildcard and you just get rid of them in a heartbeat, or you look to use one of them as part of your free transfer strategy and simply go Rashford to Saka Do not even think about it. Just get it done. And that is a perfect sideways move. And then if you have additional free transfers, maybe they look to sell Bruno Fernandes to another asset like a Liverpool player, like an Aston Villa player if you want to. But I just wanted to put this slide in because I know there might be a small amount of FPL managers that are in the same boat as me. And I do think if you own double Man United attackers and you've held them this long, you gotta hold them for the worst fixture in the league, which is ironically the best fixture for attackers. Right, FPL managers, as I discussed at the start, I want to quickly touch on the new midfield template because I think we are going to slowly go towards something slightly different to what we are seeing right now. So what I've got up here is basically the highest owned midfielders in the game. Now, of course, in terms of a combination, this doesn't necessarily mean that managers have these 5 players in their teams because otherwise I don't really know how you could afford it. But I just put them on there just for context because Saka currently the highest owned midfielder in the game. Then we've got Mitoma, Salah and the double Spurs midfield. And I think right now a double Spurs midfield is a very, very popular strategy. If you wildcarded in game week 8, I no doubt expect that you have Maddison and Son. And even if you don't wildcard previous game weeks, if you haven't wildcarded in previous game weeks, you probably still have investment in both of these, if not at least one of those. Mo Salah is probably the big one right now. You're probably like me, where you haven't wildcarded and don't own Mo Salah, or you wildcarded and you own Mo Salah. I think it's as simple as that right now. So the reason why I put the highest owned midfielders in the game is because I think we are going to slowly start moving away from certain parts of these and moving towards some of these assets. So first and foremost, Saka right now, I would say, and I've put it here, have been sold by a lot of active FPL managers. So those in the community have definitely moved away from Arsenal assets based on the last few game weeks because Saka was injured, and I think naturally managers moved away from him to invest in the likes of Son or Maddison. So even though he's the most owned midfielder in the game, I do think he is highly owned by maybe some inactive FPL managers, but I do apologise if I've insulted anyone there. But what I am saying is this: expect huge moves to him in game week 10 wildcard situations, because while he is the highest owned midfielder in the game, that is only going to continue to increase now, because game week 9, I don't think there'll be many purchases for him. But in game week 10, that is where the hordes, the masses are going to move towards him. So right now he's the highest owned midfielder, and he will continue to be the highest owned once we get to game week 10. And he will firmly be part of the midfield template. Now, in terms of Mo Salah, I've put here, Salah was heavily bought by managers who wildcarded in game week 8. And I think the same is going to continue to apply in game week 9 and game week 10. So whatever Mo Salah's ownership is right now, he is just going to continue to increase and increase and increase, because some will jump in now because of the Everton fixture, and a lot will jump in game week 10 when they wildcard for that Nottingham Forest fixture. And Salah is absolutely going to be part of this new midfield template that we are about to see. Some managers have diverged and obviously gone without Mo Salah. I see very few go without Mo Salah in the upcoming game weeks, just because the fixtures are too damn good. Now, I want to quickly touch on the Spurs double. The reason why they're currently in here, because I don't actually think they're part of the midfield template going forward, but I think they need to be part of the midfield template for game week 9, because as I said, the fixture that they have at home against Fulham is not the time to move away from them. However, game week 10 onwards, I think managers are going to get into a position where they're going to look at their double Spurs and they're going to say, I need to get rid of one. We've covered that off already. I would sell Son to the likes of Saka. And I've put in here, obviously, I think that game week 8 wildcarders are going to start selling one of those. And game week 10 wildcarders are going to go without either or own one, likely Maddison. So I expect that to be downgraded to a Jared Bowen of West Ham. That's where I expect to see the midfield template move towards. Last up, Mitoma. Really surprising to see him being the second most owned midfielder in the game. But again, I expect a lot of active managers probably haven't owned Mitoma for a few game weeks. However, game week 9, again, isn't the time to buy him away against Man City. But from game week 10 onwards, Brighton's fixtures long term are right up there with some of the best. And I do think we are going to be tempted to jump back on Brighton. And I expect Mitoma to become part of the template midfield once again. Now, yes, Europa League is an issue for Brighton assets, but Mitoma is one of those that I think is slightly in the clique of Estupiñán, Mitoma, who just don't really get rotated. And I think if you're wildcarding in game week 10 and you see that home fixture against Fulham, I think you're going to want to jump straight on Mitoma for that brilliant run-in. So that is currently the midfield template. and I expect Salah to continue to be in it, Saka and Matoma, but I fully expect those Spurs midfielders to move away from the template with the introduction of a Jared Bowen and maybe even a Diaby in that system. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd also expect to see maybe the introduction of Martinelli at 7.7 million. Right guys, last few sections of the Game Week 9 preview, and I wanted to quickly discuss when to wildcard. Now the reason being is because if you're sat there right now with your wildcard in hand, I think there are 3 strategies that you can go down. The first one is going to be Game Week 9. That's right now, and I would have advised you to have done that at the start of the international break to ride through some of the price rises and falls. So if you're watching this right now and you haven't already wildcarded, I'd be very tempted to say Game Week 9 wildcard is not for you. Otherwise, 10 is a definite strategy that one would consider and one that I think I'm going to go towards. And the other one is pulling the trigger in Game Weeks 18 or 19 in preparation for the potential double Game Week 20. So let me just quickly rinse through some of these. These are slightly catered towards my team, but I expect you have a very similar team to me if you haven't wildcarded already. For example, Game Week 9 wildcard. The benefits of doing it is you probably don't own Mo Salah right now, so you're looking at the Everton home fixture thinking, I just need Mo Salah and there's no other way for me to get him, so I gotta get the wildcard done. And that makes complete sense. I think that is definitely a viable strategy. One of the reasons for it's good is you can sell Man United players. Some people are completely done with them. But as I discussed earlier on in the video, I personally am going to keep them for 1 week. Therefore, it basically comes down to this in Game Week 9. Man United assets versus Mo Salah. If you don't wildcard this week, you basically, I imagine, own Man United midfielders. And it means you're basically asking for 1 week them to match or outscore Mo Salah. It has been horrendous the last few weeks. But if there ever was a fixture for them to do it, it is going to be against Sheffield United. And the other value of doing it in Game Week 9 is you were building squad value. But if you're doing it now, you're not going to build any squad value, basically. The problems with doing a Game Week 9 wildcard is you're probably selling Trippier, I imagine. I'll be doing the same, and that doesn't sit right with me right now. Again, you're selling United versus Sheffield, and it's too early to go for Arsenal. Now, I will be showing you a Game Week 9 wildcard draft, which does include Arsenal, but it feels a 1 week too early to do it. And I feel like, as I said, if you're selling United to allocate a spot for a Saka, that could be done in Game Week 10. And that's why I prefer the Game Week 10 strategy. I just don't see any reason why 9 is better than 10, apart from you could have built some squad value during the international break, because whatever you're going to get in Game Week 10, you probably are going to get in Game Week 9, and you could have just bought them a little bit earlier and got them at cheaper prices. But I love Game Week 10 because you can go big on Liverpool. You can go big on Arsenal when their fixtures do completely change. You might not be sat there with Watkins and they got Luton at home. A great time to invest. And also, I think you can confidently sell Man United assets knowing that the fixture just isn't good against Man City. Last up, 18-19. You got to wait a long time for this one. And the main benefit being is because there is an expectation that Man City will have their double game week in Game Week 20 against Sheffield United and Brentford at home. And of course, Brentford will also double in 20 if it does get announced. So with a wildcard, what you're able to do is navigate the blank game week that will be happening in Game Week 18 and then wildcard back into triple Man City and potentially triple Brentford players as well. So it's a nice strategy. The problem with is, and it applies for my team, is you need serious points hits over this period, because there's no way I'm going to go without Arsenal players, Liverpool players and Villa players over this period. And if you're a manager like me who doesn't have any ownership in them, you got to probably take -12s, -16s to completely change the structure of your team to bring those players in. For me, that is just not an option. A wildcard in Game Week 10 is my choice. But let me know yours in the comments. Right, FPL managers, thank you for sitting through the video so far. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. But last up, we need to talk about Game Week 9 Wildcard Draft. Now, as I have said, I do not like the Game Week 9 Wildcard Draft. The only way I would consider it is if my team was in a real bad position and I needed to pull the trigger because I had injuries or rotation risks. Otherwise, I think if you're sat there with double Man United, it's not enough for a reason to sell them in a wild card. I think you just wait until Game Week 10. But hey, if you pull the trigger, this is how my team would look. The Turner-Areola combination just looks good. And the reason why I like it is because it's cheap and cheerful. And if Turner does lose his place, you can just play Areola in his fixtures long term because they are very good. And I would confidently play Areola week in, week out. I just don't think there is a standout goalkeeper this season that is just absolutely jumping out as the go-to pick. Moving into the defenders, slight deliberation here. I think Matty Cash is a non-negotiable until maybe he loses his place, but I doubt it. And Gabriel, again, I don't like it for game week 9 with the fixture against Chelsea, but long term, I think you're going to want him. So I think he's just a great budget pick in that team. And the same is going to apply for Tsimikas, 4.4 million. The reason why I don't like the game week 9 wildcard as opposed to 10 is because you could do 1 game week's worth of information to understand if Tsimikas is in the team, then wildcard in game week 10 with the confidence that he is going to be a starter. But you might have to take the punt in game week 9 if you are wildcarding, and I think it probably is worth it, but you do know there are risks there. Taylor, cheap and cheerful, and Dan Burn at 4.7 million. Now, we talked about the Newcastle fixtures. They're starting to get a little bit difficult, and I don't think Newcastle clean sheets are a given now, but it's very difficult to go against the Newcastle defence right now. So I think Burn is a good investment. Otherwise, Botman. It's worth noting, I would love to have Trippier in this team, but I just couldn't allocate the funds in this team. Moving into the midfield, I've gone for Saka early. That's only if he is confirmed fit for game week 9. Again, I don't like Saka for this game week necessarily. I would much rather wildcard in 10, bringing him in for the Sheffield United at home fixture. But I think if you are going to do the wildcard now, I think you just got to allocate a spot for Saka and just play him against Chelsea. Salah, non-negotiable. Now, I've put Maddison in the team right now because if you are wildcarding in game week 9, yes, you want to look long term, but you can't be ignoring what's in front of your face. And Fulham at home for Maddison is a brilliant fixture. So I would put Maddison in as a bit of a placeholder that you could maybe move him to a Martinelli in game week 10 if you want to double down on those Arsenal fixtures. Bowen, as I mentioned, I think he's a great long-term pick. And Matoma as well. I don't like him for game week 9, but again, game week 10 onwards is fantastic. So maybe you just go a week early, bring him in, and then have him in there for that game week 10 fixture. And last up, the front three kind of picks itself, to be honest with you. Watkins, Haaland, Archer. I do apologise. I haven't updated the prices of Watkins and Haaland there, so I will do that in the comment section. I believe Watkins is now 8.2 and Haaland is 14. But look, this is how the wildcard would look for game week 9. I think it's quite well balanced, and you can use some free transfers in upcoming weeks to move towards the team that you might want if you were not wildcarding in game week 10. Yes, guys, okay, that is going to wrap up today's very long video. I really do hope it has provided some value. As always, if you did enjoy it, I really appreciate you dropping a like on the video. It just shows me that you did actually enjoy it. And of course, if you are new around here and you liked what you saw, please do consider smashing that subscribe button. We got lots of videos coming over the next 24 hours. So make sure you do hit that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Cheers.